Enjoy your meeting.
Oh, darn, I should have had my Plantronics mug. What was I thinking?
Just a reminder, today's meeting is being recorded.
Oh, welcome to our video interview today. I'm David Hattabus, and joining me today is Richard Kinney. He's the head of Global Contact Center Marketing over at Plantronics. And for those of you who don't know, Plantronics has been a long-time CCNG partner. And today we're kind of launching a series of video interviews where we're going to talk to various topics, and I'll explain that briefly in a moment. Richard, 13-year veteran working with contact centers. Most of his focus has been understanding the key trends, ensuring his clients deliver solutions that help contact centers do better customer service. So he's got a lot of exposure globally as well as domestically in this field. And we wanted to pick his brains on a number of things. Personally, he's in pretty good shape. He's just finished 2 Ironman triathlons. I'm going to assume, Richard, that you didn't do those back-to-back. It was more about planned.
No, I needed about 10 years to recover between them.
Well, kudos to you. I've yet to ever do one. So as the scope of our interview today, we're going to cover 4 topics. Talk a little bit about the important trends on a global basis, some recruiting and skill set issues, how the workspace has changed, and a little bit on technology. So I'll ask Richard for his comments on each of these topics, and then we'll move along to the next topic. And we should be right around 10-15 minutes in the video interview today. So we'll get kicked off here right away. Richard, if you're ready, welcome. Thank you for doing this with us.
My pleasure. Good morning, David.
So, important trends globally. Are we seeing things the same across the globe as we are in the U.S., or do countries tend to vary? Give us your perspective. Most of us spend most of our time domestically, so we don't see how things are on a global front. But can you speak to country, or are things pretty flat?
I'd say things are actually very flat in terms of the major trends that we're seeing. The only difference really is the time scales of adoption. So, for example, we're looking at the employees within contact centers moving from being what people call agents into being much more of a knowledge worker role. So there's a curve that takes people from that one point to the other. And pretty much every country is somewhere along that curve. There's no real differences or divergences from the things that people are seeing. You might find that social media is a little more common in certain countries. You might find that working from home is less common than in domestic areas. But generally, the global trends are that social media is becoming really important to contact centers. Self-service is taking away the easy interactions, and that pretty much everywhere around the world, the phone call coming in is much, much more important to that company. It's more complicated, it takes longer, and it takes the skills of more than one person to solve it. So far from the digital world taking away the purpose of the contact center, we're finding that the contact center is becoming much more important because of those phone calls coming in.
I just was in a meeting yesterday with the director of a contact center operation, and her pain point is around skill sets and hiring and recruiting to critical thinkers, people who can handle more complex, to your point. Who should they be recruiting in the contact center these days, and how have those skill sets changed, and what's the demand today and going forward?
So I think the contact center industry globally is on the cusp of a change at the moment. It's recognizing that it needs to get higher skilled employees. But I think we're still hitting some budget constraints. Many countries are still in recession. Companies themselves aren't quite confident that we're coming out of that. So they're not quite sure that they can really move to that high-end knowledge worker on every single phone. So the decision point at the moment seems to be, do we really try and upskill the employees to make sure that they can handle everything? Or do we put in more collaboration so that our front-end team are almost a broker to access the areas of expertise within the organization? So there's very different skill sets required for each of those ones, but what we're seeing from companies is a request for things like listening skills. If the call coming into an organization is much more complex, it might be quite an emotional connection that you've got with that end user. So the real thing to focus on first is listening to that user's issue, listening to their problems, and being empathetic with them. And that empathy is that second big request that we're seeing for people as well. The idea that they can relate to the problem that the user's got. Yes, people might like self-service. Companies might be trying to put in artificial intelligence, but there's nothing quite like having a human being who values service on the phone to give you empathy and understand your issue. So those are the sort of the big key things that we're looking at. Still we're looking at things like problem-solving skills. Those sort of things are still common for people, but the listening and the empathizing are the key things that we're looking for. And really goes back to almost that personal service days that we used to have many years ago, that people are valuing the service that people give them.
Yeah, I would echo that. That's what we're hearing in CCNG land as well. There's a lot of discussion around empathy, and that's different than sympathy, frankly. Talk to me a little bit about the work.
It's that, sorry, David, I was going to say it's that emotional connection. Sympathy is, you can understand somebody's problem, but empathy is that real connection with people, which I think really only a human can actually give. Absolutely,
absolutely. A little bit about the workspaces. We've certainly heard from Plantronics over the years, and you've been on the forefront of the home worker, the work-at-home programs. Tell us a little bit about how that's evolving to meet the contact center needs. Are we at the middle of the bell curve? Are we at the end of the bell curve? Are we starting all over again? Give us your perspective.
So this is one area where there's quite a bit of difference in different areas around the world. What I find in some of the more social countries, if I think like South America, Spain, Italy, France, where there's much more of a culture of people working together, then we don't see work at home taking off in those areas at all. People value coming into the office, meeting their colleagues face-to-face, going out for lunch together. So in those sort of areas, we do see a slightly different evolution of the spaces. What we see is that companies are focusing on the spaces within their building. And they're recognizing that there's maybe 4 different types of work that people do. Communication, which is all about phone calls, passionate engagements with customers. Collaboration, which is working with your team. Contemplation, which is taking time out to really get away from the hard work that contact centers are becoming now. And also concentration, getting your head down, doing web chats, social media, etc. And each of those 4 different areas requires a different acoustic treatment around your workspace. So for example, if you're on the phone, you want to be able to speak freely and not disturb your neighbors. If you are doing web chats, then you don't want to be listening to all the conversations around you. So companies are starting to look at having these 4 different types of workspaces within their campus or within their building. So this is quite cutting edge. We did a webinar on it recently all about the different acoustic treatments and the way to stop noise. Because we think that actually that background noise is a really big distraction. We see that people get a big productivity improvement when they move to working from home because they get rid of that background noise. And it's how do we mimic that within the sort of enterprise or the office environments. So it's that sort of different creation of spaces. And what companies are really trying to get to with that is what's the right workspace to match the work that people are doing to make them more effective.
And we hear a lot of discussion around tending to the agent, whether that's multi-screen or lack of information that they have that perhaps the customer, regarding the customer journey. There seems to be a lot more focus on the team and the people these days to kind of complete that circle of improved customer experience.
Yeah, and that would be a lovely question that I've got for your users here is that, for years we've called the workers in contact centers agents. And I'm sort of really against that term, to be honest. For me, it says it's mundane, it's repetitive. And I think the work that people in contact centers do is much, much more valuable than that, and we need to recognize it. I haven't come across a good job title yet. We hear everything, customer service representatives, technical service representatives, customer managers, lots of different titles, but I haven't really come across one that sort of sticks and makes a good connection yet. But I really think we as an industry have got to recognize that the really high value that our people are doing. And it might be just a small thing, changing a job title, but it's one overall part of really recognizing the work that people do within contact centers and seeing the high value that it creates for companies.
That's a great point. We certainly have seen it in management titles, Vice President of Customer Experience, Director of Customer Experience, moving away from the telephone channel as the sole means of communicating and referring to them as call center managers. How is technology changing the way we interact with customers in your viewpoint? I mean, there's a lot of discussion around channels and, the customer journey and, what the customer expects in millennials versus Gen Ys and Gen Xers and all that stuff. But how, in your viewpoint, how are things really changing the way we interact with our customers?
I think there's probably a couple of key changes to look at here. And one is the idea of, it's actually quite almost a revolution for the way that contact centers used to be. Contact centers used to be siloed away from the business. But what we're seeing now with those calls coming in, they're being much more complex, then we need the skills of back office people to solve it more and more often. So for me, what I'm seeing on a regular basis is the use of unified communications type technology coming into the contact center. So you can either communicate just by short instant messages with remote colleagues, or you can connect up to a supervisor or connect into the back office to find somebody that can help you onto a phone call. The reason it's really important for contact centers is you've got a presence icon, a little different color for each person to say this person's available to speak, this one isn't. And we're seeing that start to be adopted in quite a few contact centers. The next stage is to move away from just sort of short text chats with people into saying, actually, I'm going to bring somebody from the back office onto this phone call so they can give the benefits of their expertise straight to the customer. That way the employee in the contact center hears the answer, they know it for themselves, they can populate the knowledge base, they can track this through to first call resolution. Now what does the person in the back office get? Well, what they get is a real voice of the customer story. In many cases they may hear voice of the customer programs as just average statistics, and people don't learn from statistics. Only once they've got a real story with a customer name do they suddenly make a connection and realize, actually, there's a way that we can do this better. And I've heard it direct from a customer and I know their story. So I think that unified communications and collaborations technology is going to make a real fundamental change to the way that we work within contact centers and really drive a lot more integration with the rest of the business, moving away from being a silo.
Yeah, the contact center then becoming more a respected hub in everything that's going on within the organization, and as you pointed out, not just those people over there in that department.
Yeah, one of our own sort of VP of Global Customer Care, Paul, talks that, contact centers used to be a barrier to entry in the organization. But what he talks of them now as being like a wormhole to suck the contacts into the right place in the organization.
I'm going to remember that, a wormhole to suck the right information. I got that. Classic. That's classic. Well, we'll wrap it up from there. Richard, I know you travel a lot, and we really, truly appreciate you taking time with us today. I hope to continue the series with you and with others within the organization because you guys really do have a very vast knowledge. You're in, I would say, arguably, the bulk of all customer contact center operations, and that's a very unique position. Therefore, you have unique perspectives. But we truly appreciate you taking time.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you for your time as well. I'm really looking forward to working for a really long time with your members as well.
Thank you, Richard.
Thanks.